All right, everybody, welcome. This is Two EdTech Guys. Take questions and share cool stuff too. All right, and we are excited to get Richard back because this was Richard's morning last week. And Richard, I believe you took a picture of this from the same angle.
Yes, on the next slide.
That is a very different look. I'm going to go back one. Last week, this week. I think we've seen an improving trend for you there, my friend.
Yes, yes. Although it did snow this morning briefly.
Oh yeah. Well, I hope that that requires notably less shoveling than what you dealt with a week ago.
Yeah.
So let's pass out some thank yous because it's always good to start with some thank yous. If you're not in the practice of tossing out a few thank yous in your life, I would recommend you get into that practice. And first to Holly and Jesse for stepping in last week when Richard was under the snowpocalypse. So good to have you guys with us. Last week, totally cool shares. You guys, follow these guys on Twitter. I'll get their stuff in the chat. And as always, I'll have a doc on our webinars page that has all the links that we share as part of the chat. So you can get back to any of the links that Richard and I toss out there for you. We also want to thank Richard, of course, and Free Tech for Teachers. His blog of, 15,000 something blog posts you've put up over time?
15,032, but who's counting?
Good man. And loads of good info there. I think, if you go and you take a look at the post, you'll understand why it's been such a successful blog. Really good information, not just a link. Just say no to just links. That's kind of where we are. So nice shout out to all the Fowler USD folks who are out there and the Jerome team, all my peeps over in Jerome, Idaho. Sean from Fall City Academy is with us. Great stuff they are doing with their team, their students, and so good to have you guys around. We are happy to meet you if this is your first time to take in Two EdTech Guys. And we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves. My first order of business is that I run a little nonprofit. I'm a former teacher, former principal, and I run an educational nonprofit, have run it for the last 15 years called Next Vista for Learning. It's a video library by and for teachers and students everywhere. And we have videos about academic topics, about communities, about service to others, about careers, about English language learning, things like that. So if you're interested in any of that, just stay in touch and we will make sure that you get that. You will, and definitely, Cecilia, you will not need to mark these things down on paper. You'll be able to get back to the webinars page from which you registered, and we'll have all of that there. So we will have loads of good stuff for you along those lines. Clearly what's going on in our rather strange world at the moment is that we are looking to keep the learning going however possible. And the goal is to do this in ways that allow us to begin seeing not just how to make up for misses that we might have experienced in-person learning, but also to be thinking in terms of how can we take advantage of this system as it is to help kids who might not have connected to everything in a classroom in a way that really inspired them to see something new. So that is part of our goal as we hit these different things. And you're going to find that as we jump into this and share a few things, you're going to hear kind of how we talk about them. And then there's going to be questions. So we've got questions that have come in over the course of the week. We've got questions that you might toss out into the chat. Feel free to toss those in. We will give them our best shot. Can't promise you that the answers will be good, but we promise we'll give it a try. So that's how that works. Richard, give us a quick share here.
So quick share, a new tool called Video Puppet. Videopuppet.com. It is really neat because you can take your PowerPoint slides, upload them, and it will spit out a narrated video based on those slides. Now, a couple of quick little things about it. Number one, you can do up to 20 slides at a time, and it's free. You don't have to sign up. If you have more than 20 slides, then you need to register and go through a whole bunch of stuff. But 20 slides or fewer, you're good to go. You need to put in your speaker notes. It's based on your speaker notes. So if you don't have any speaker notes, put your speaker notes in before you upload your slides. And the last little thing I'll say about it is that you can use this with your Google Slides or your Keynote slides. People have emailed me this week and said, will it work with Google Slides? Yes, it will, but you just have to export your Google Slides as PowerPoint slides. So go to your file menu, select download as, and select PowerPoint. Then you got a PowerPoint file that you can upload to Video Puppet, and it'll make your video. Do the same in Keynote as well. If you're a Chromebook user, you obviously don't have PowerPoint on your Chromebook, but you can still do this. You can still download as PowerPoint file and upload, and it's awesome. It's a little robotic. Oh, I should say also that it supports, I think, 20 something languages. 20 something languages are supported by it. So that's helpful.
And like anything like this, right? Sometimes teachers will be like, "That's great," and then so they'll pull out like a PowerPoint file that they really love and try it. And like their first shot at this, they try to put like a big PowerPoint file in, try to make it all happen. Always try a simplified version first, right? Create like a 2-slide thing where you're just putting things in the notes, the presenter notes, so that you can kind of get a sense of, well, how does it read it? How's that going to work for my crowd? Stuff like that. So wonderfully cool tool to come around. I like that they've got a little video piece right there. We just leave that in the slides, or is that something you want people to see at the moment?
No, that's just a video. That's just a video about how to use it that you can watch at your own leisure when you get a chance.
At your leisure. Excellent. Okay, my share, you're going to look at this screen and you're going to say, okay, this is some kind of like gaming thing, because of the way the colors work and everything. No, this is Street View. This is a real picture. This is La Sagrada Familia, right, in Barcelona, in Spain. And what it is, this is one of the 15 favorite Street View spots by the Street View people. So the Street View people said, what are our favorite spots? And there are all kinds of cool ones. So like if you go to this one, for example, and you're looking around, you're like, that's really fun. That's cool. You can kind of see all over this beautiful place. They caught it at a time when the light was coming through the windows, the stained glass windows, and creating all of these kind of beautiful, effects in terms of the lighting. Really amazing spots. And for so many of us, it's hard to like get time to go travel somewhere, but hey, if it's right here, and Street View has this set up. So like here's Tokyo and the cherry blossoms, right? Here's Mont Blanc in the Alps, right? So if you want to do some climbing stuff, you can check that out. If you want to get way out into Mongolia, where they have a big ice festival there, and something about like taking a horse-drawn carriage across a frozen lake, to me is that's pretty bold, I would say. But at any rate, some really good pieces in Street View's 15 favorite Street Views. So feel free to give that a shot. Let me get that in the link right in the chat right there. Cool. So all good. Now, our goal is always to like give you ideas on how these things can be used. So we look at something like this. What do? Well, ask kids to start looking around on these things. What can they find? What is it that they notice? Look for a detail. And the idea is to have everybody choose some different detail and develop a question about it. What are these pictures that are in the Sagrada Familia? What is it about the nature of the architecture there, so that they begin to learn something about Gaudí or something like that. Begin to start putting like how do you put stories together related to this? What's the math that goes into a place like this? When we're looking at light in this fashion, what's the science behind that? There are loads and loads of different questions that can be a part of this. And part of what we want to do whenever we get a class going, whether in person or online, is give our students something that intrigues them right off the bat. Don't start out with a bunch of announcements, from blah, 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 blah. The kids are already like on another site or whatever. Instead say, starting with this image, take a look. What do you see? All right, your job is to find a detail, right? And the first one to get into the chat has that detail. That's your detail. And then you start putting those things in place so that you can build an engaged discussion as you're trying to get a class going. So there you go. That's my share. Street Views, 15 favorite Street Views. There you go. Now, any of these that we do as part of the quick shares, as we get going with the show, we put on a particular page. It's called the Two Guys resources page, right? And so if you go to tinyurl.com/2guys-resources, which we'll get that link in the chat as well, you can see all of this stuff. Now, we'll mention other things as we answer the questions, but for our quick shares, you can find those guys there, so you know. Let's jump into some questions. Richard, talk to us about some of the things that have come in this week.
So, question just came in from Brandon that I think is a good kind of overall question. What do you recommend when we have all of these resources and we're just learning how to do distance learning?
Mm,
I'll take a crack at it. I'll let you take a crack at it.
sounds good.
So I've gotten a lot of variations on this question over the last month or so from my own colleagues as well as everyone on the internet. The thing that I've kind of come back to is the same advice I've given for years about integrating technology into your physical classroom. So you got to start with that one thing that you think is going to be relatively easy to get started with and is going to have an immediate benefit to you and or your students. Right? Like some things are going to have a benefit to both you and your students, and some are going to be just a benefit to your students or just a benefit to you. But pick that one thing, and really invest in that for a chunk of time, as opposed to trying to, do a whole bunch of stuff at once. It's that one thing at a time, right? Like, I'm getting some data, I guess you could call it data points. I'm starting to get now where I'm seeing that the type of questions we're getting are moving away from nuts and bolts on Google Classroom or Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Pick your three major platforms there. We're getting away from those nuts and bolts, and now we're getting into, okay, now what are we going to transition into? How are we going to get into this? And so I come back to that thing of one thing. And I always say like one thing a month is kind of a nice rule of thumb. If you could do one thing per month in a physical classroom, you'd be doing great. And I think if you could do one thing every 6 to 8 weeks in a virtual classroom in terms of new stuff for you and your students, you'd be doing really well too.
I like it. And let's take this from another angle as well, right? Because I think that's a good piece to build from. Starting with, there is a big mistake that a lot of teachers make when they think about technology, which is this: I have to have it mastered before I use it with the students. You are absolved of that particular problem. Let that go. All you need to know is, all right, does it have a potential for a particular thing you want to teach? And so like what Richard was saying a minute ago, like, okay, there's what's the one thing? If you're looking at that in that way, that's really useful. Now, you might say, well, but if I don't really know how it works, no. You know just enough. And be open with your students. Hey guys, here's a tool that I'd like for us to explore a bit. So it's not that I am now teaching you this. It's like we're going to explore this together. And so I'm interested in your doing this. But as you begin to work with this tool, what do you notice? So in the same way that we try to start a class with something engaging so that their minds are focused, we use tools in such a way that students know that they are a part of a learning process. And so I'm back?
You're back.
So myself frozen on the other computer. I'm like, man, did I say something wrong? So anyway, what I was saying was that, in the same way that we want a class to start well through something, kind of cool and engaging, we want to engage students in processes in addition to content. So we're asking them to look at the stuff we're doing and say, okay, so how can we use this? What would be another way to use this? And give people that opportunity to pull that together. Cool. Richard, keep us going.
It would help if I unmuted myself. There we go.
All good.
Question just came in from Cecilia about copying and pasting the chat or saving the chat. I know you usually cover that, so I'll let you cover that. But yes, you can. All right.
Yeah. So the resources that you see popping up, so there's these different things that appear in the chat. And in Zoom, if you are the person who launched this, you have a little doodad. I'm going to call it a doodad. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this set up so that we can take a look at it. All right. And you're like, how are we going to take a look at this on your screen if it's in Zoom? Well, what I'm going to do is I am going to take a screenshot of my screen. Right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screenshot so that you can see this. All right. So there's me in mid-word. But if you look over here on the lower right, you see there's a little square with rounded edges with dots. Now, this may or may not be on your system. If it is not, then you are not a bad person. This is not a reflection on your character or anything like that. What it is it's just how the system works with a particular kind of Zoom, like I'm going to say system again, but we're using a webinar tool right now. It may or may not be interacting in a way that you see this. If you don't worry. You can always write me and say, hey, there was this thing that I had a question about, because that's why we put the doc together as part of the resources that you see on our webinars page. And let me make sure that you know where that is as well, because if you go back and take a look at some of the previous things we've done, you might get quite excited about that, right? So let's take a look at the webinars page real quick. So here it is. When you go to the webinars page, it says, okay, here's upcoming, right? Here's the one we're doing right now. There's service via video this afternoon. Please join in. All right, and then previously, okay, so here's the one that Susan and I did yesterday on activities across grade levels exploring the world, right? Which is a great thing to go back and check, I'm just saying. All right, but if you look here, I've got this thing, click here for the slides, here for the links from the transcript. And as you go back, there's our careers project we did yesterday morning. Here's last week, when Holly and Jesse stepped in. So we've got like the resources in more detail, we've got the slides and the links. So you can get back to everything that way. So that's kind of a functional share as we go, but hopefully that will be useful. And then also notice, right, that Peggy says on a Mac, all right, you can do a select all via Command A, that's Control A on a PC, and you can get the entire chat and just copy and then paste it into whatever you want, like an email or a doc or Word doc or whatever kind of floats your boat on that front.
All right. Cool. So do we want to cover another question?
Let's do it.
All right. So a question that I got from my pal Larry, who wrote, hope you are well. I have a question for you. I want to have my 5th graders make their own podcast. Any suggestions of good apps or sites to use for building the podcasts? Thanks, Larry. So there are 2 things that I recommend if you're trying to do. First of all, if you're trying to do a full-fledged podcast, with like distributing it to iTunes and Google Play and all that, if you're trying to do that, Anchor.fm makes that process really easy to do, because they'll distribute your podcast for you. You don't have to monkey around with making an RSS feed and all that. They'll do all that stuff for you. Okay? That said, Anchor.fm also has a built-in recording tool, but there's not really any editing in the Anchor recording tool. So if you want to do the editing, I would do either Audacity or GarageBand, or if you're a Chromebook user, Twisted Wave. Those will cover all 3 big platforms to do your actual editing. If you're trying to do editing with sound effects and bumper music and all that stuff, that's the tool to use. Now, if you're talking about podcasting in the context of just, I want to have my students record themselves for 2 or 3 minutes and be able to listen to it, then you can there's a lot of really simple tools like Vocaroo.com, which has just recently switched over from being Flash-based to being HTML5, so now that works everywhere. OnlineVoiceRecorder.com, online-voice-recorder.com.
Got that.
That will work. And what's the other one that you mentioned last week?
SpeakPipe Voice Recorder.
SpeakPipe will also do that.
So I just put all of those links into the chat, and I think the really good advice coming from pointing to these simple ones is that starting simple is always a good idea, right? Whatever it is you're trying to do, if you're going from like, I've never done this before to 6-week project, this may be a bad move. All right. So I would just say, figure out, okay, well, what are the simple things? I want my kids to do podcasts. First of all, very, very cool. Oh my goodness. I have all of these things in all panelists instead of all panelists and attendees. Hey, Richard, while I'm adding profound thoughts verbally on this, if you'd move all of those into the thing. Thank you, Peggy, for pointing that out. Now, taking these simple tools, all right, so something like Online Voice Recorder or SpeakPipe, get them into a space where they're doing something very, very simple. So what they're doing is their job is to describe a connection with something they're learning. They can end up with a link that they send, like SpeakPipe is real good about that. Only 3 months with a link, but still. So they give you a link, you click it, and you can hear them and hear their thought processes. And they can hear it before they decide that link is going to be there. Then move them up to the next piece of that, which is they have to add some sound effects. So whatever it may be, whatever they want, but have that add. So they're beginning to think in terms of, now I'm adding components of these pieces. Now you can keep adding to this. You can, and that's both technically in terms of what the podcast sounds like, and in terms of content, where they're having to do things like describe an idea and describe where people, get confused about ideas. So they're looking for how not to do things, academically, right? And in describing that way, you're going to have students go, wait, what? That's a problem? That's a good thing for them to hear. Additionally, when we really begin to take this to the next level, take a look at Soundtrap. All right, so let's see. I'm going to get Soundtrap, the link in there. This is an amazing tool, right? And there is kind of the big difference between the free and the paid version, but what you'll find is that you can do a lot like you can do in GarageBand on a Mac online on Soundtrap. The people who run the company are these kind of really, really cool Swedish people, who are like, yeah, we were doing this so that people could do music like around the world, like Swedes are really into their music. So all cool there. So lots and lots of possibilities with that. But the key thing is start simple, right? Start simple and start building. And what you'll find is the kids will start bringing extra little things into it that'll adjust your thinking about how to keep moving it forward.
All right. Okay. Let's take a look. All right. What do you think about this one, Rushton? I'm trying to truncate it, but I guess I'll just do it. I'll do it straightforward. All right. Sorry. All right. So I hope you're well. If you have time to remember, how to use your iPad as a document camera and then record the demonstration for students to see in Google Classroom. That's essentially what the question is getting at here. I had to cut through all the rest of the context. But want to use your iPad as a document camera and record it for students to see in Google Classroom. What are your thoughts?
So one of the nice things about an iPad, iPads are devices with strengths and weaknesses, just like every other technology tool and just like everybody you know. So with an iPad, one of the great things you can do is obviously just simple digital media stuff, right? So you can record. It's got a camera, you can record. Now, clearly there is a physical issue of, I need for this thing to be in this space in order to show what I'm writing or whatever. And I've seen people, just kind of like stack some things up, put a couple of, bars or, like pieces, simple pieces of wood across, so they just put it on top and then they've got this space under it. Whatever works is fine. But once you've recorded it, then the question for any device, iPad or otherwise, right, is how do you share it? And if it's in the camera roll or if it's in, your Photos app or anything like that, then there's going to be some way to share it. If you can share it directly to Google Drive, which will mean that what you're doing is creating that connection between the app and Google Drive, which typically is fine. If it's fly-by-night software, well, but if lots of people are using it, in the EdTech space, then you're probably in good shape. Then you're just, that's the easy way to get it there. And once it's in Drive, it's easy to get in Classroom. Richard, what would you add to that?
I would add that I would think about, do you actually need the document camera? Because with that iPad, you might be able to cut out that whole portion of recording the document and just do something like use Explain Everything or Show Me or one of those type of apps, and you can cut out that intermediate step of trying to fill. And I know there's been a lot of these floating around on Twitter of like people hacking or making their own little document camera stands out of cans of beans and things like that. That is one that I actually really liked. Someone had taken this giant tin can and prop that up for the hole in the iPad. It was interesting. But anyway, you may not need that. And the other thing is, think about, well, I've got this weird background today. my arm disappears when I do that. That's neat. But behind me, I actually have a physical whiteboard. I have a small whiteboard that I use, and I've done that for my own computer science classes. Sometimes it's just easier if you're doing a live class to just whip around and go, all right, here, put it on the board, as opposed to trying to bring up some other tool and fumble around with that, because we're talking about kids who are sitting in front of their computers at home looking for, in many cases, any opportunity to open a different tab or look at Snapchat or whatever else. And if you're fumbling around, and you might lose them. So it might be easier just turn around and go, hey, look at my whiteboard right here. Right? And I got a cheap one at Walmart way back before pandemic hit.
So simple is good, for sure. I will show one other thing that if you're up for exploring a new tool, it might be kind of cool for you, and that is that in where we got it, boom, right there, and share in Drive. There is a thing now called Jamboard, right? Okay. So you go to like start, and then there's more, and then you come down. There's forms, drawings, blah 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 blah. Google Jamboard. And what this is designed to be is like a collaborative whiteboard space. And I haven't used it much, but a couple of people I know who've used it are like, this is great, this is awesome. So feel free to give that a look. It might be something that simplifies the process for you for having something in Drive that allow you to easily get it in Classroom. Yeah. So Richard, I think we are probably towards the tail end of this, unfortunately. So here's the thing about joining us for these live recordings. What we do is we go about 30 minutes and then we stop the recording. But all of the cool people, oh, by the way, Melissa said Zoom has a whiteboard screen too. Melissa, nice share, right? All of the cool people who are on this, they can stick around and keep asking questions. So if they're kind of like, hey, I've got this question that I didn't want to ask it, while you were recording, totally fine, stick around and do so. That's one of the reasons you want to join us every week, for the fun that we try to bring, because we figure by Friday you're kind of like stressed and like, I need a break, and so we want to have something that both gives you ideas and has fun with it at the same time. So with that, let me get us back to our slides, and so we can wind some things down here. Remember that in this kind of crazy time of distance learning, everybody's suddenly distance learning, right? We're still doing the same thing we've always done, right? Which is we have to care for these kids. We have to care for their learning. And to do that well, we have to care for ourselves. We have to make sure that we are getting like the rest we need, like we're eating right, we're getting some exercise, we're getting away from the screens, right? And making sure that we're in a good space, because, the kids may be stressed out of their minds. A lot of them have home situations that, let's just say, are not optimal. And so you might be that one adult that smiles at them, right? So make sure that you are doing what you need to do to care for yourself and be there for these kids. I'll get in the chat links to the newsletter. I send out a newsletter every month. I give people the chance to like win a $5 Starbucks card, because I think that's fun. And sometimes only a couple of people enter. Wow, crazy. This goes to like 8,000 people around the world, but who knew? So feel free to give that a look. And the April newsletter will be in the chat as well. I'll get that in there. Give that a look. I've got a blog, Inspiring Improvement, just ideas that are published, not regularly, but on a whim, in such a way that hopefully is useful to people who read it. Written some books, feel free to give those a look. If you go to the slides, you can get to the slides and click on these, take a look. This is how to become a better teacher, how to improve your school, and thoughts for leaders, things like this. Richard, tell us a little bit about your work as well.
So I have a Sunday night newsletter I call the Practical EdTech Newsletter, because I'm not good at coming up with creative names, so that's what it's called. And I have the corresponding Practical EdTech Handbook, which is free and is currently in the process of being expanded again for some more resources about remote learning and other neat things, and accessibility. Actually, Deidre just asked me about accessibility, so I have some accessibility things I'm adding into that. It's free. Check it out, practicaledtech.com. And I also have a YouTube channel, which Rushton will show you on the next slide, which now has almost 21,000 people watching my videos, where I have, interesting things in my background, but more importantly, concise tutorials on all manner of stuff. About 400 tutorials on G Suite for education tools, and a whole bunch of other stuff too. So check that out.
And Brandon
follow
asks,
me on Twitter.
Oh, definitely. Good. Twitter is a source of all kinds of goodness at this point. It's a source of all kinds of allness, right? But all good. And so Brandon asked, by the way, do you save these webinars? Are they on YouTube? On the webinars page, you can get back to all of these that we have done. So let me get that into that space, because the link that I'm tossing into the chat right now is one where you can join in for this afternoon's webinar on like a project for we're getting kids to do service videos. It's actually, I'll start with how to do a really simple video using Adobe Spark, right? That kind of thing. And we'll talk about kind of cool projects you can do. That's at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern this afternoon, early evening. So feel free to join in on that and just keep scrolling down that page and you're gonna find loads and loads of content that Richard and I have done and Susan Stewart and I have done, and just goodness all around. So I hope we'll give that a good look as you go. Brandon says it's been a great week. I've done like 7 webinars. You know, if you went to 7 webinars and they were all good, you did have a good week in the Just Saying department. All right, and then so finally, you know, thanks very much for joining us. We hope that you got some cool ideas. We hope that you understand that Richard and I see something important in just sharing ideas and having fun with them. We think that that's the kind of thing that allows teachers to be at their creative best when they know that they are part of this worldwide community of people who are trying to figure stuff out, especially now. So all of you who are on the live recording, just stick around. We'll talk to you. We'll answer more questions. If you have been joining us as a part of this as a recording, then we hope you enjoyed it and you will join us the next time we do this as well, which will be a week from today on April 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern. Take care.